So, welcome to another session of No Appointment Necessary. Today we've got Nick Knight, one of our very fine customers, who we've chatted a lot about all kinds of things. And I think Nick is pretty well renowned in podiatry circles, but we also often talk about quite a lot of controversial things. So, kind of the perfect guest for No Appointment Necessary. So, very briefly, Nick, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. And yes, we have had many chats in the past. So my name's Nick. I'm a podiatrist based in the south of England. I run a company called NK Active, which is a team of podiatrists and graduate sports rehabilitators. Basically, we just sort of think of ourselves as a centre of sort of low limb excellence, as it were.
So that's interesting, actually, because and I think when we met, you were originally, I say simply a podiatrist, but actually over time, you've moved much more into rehab and you were doing MSK
Mhm.
podiatry, which we'll get into, but you have moved more into kind of the world of, let's say, general rehab physiotherapy.
Yes. We have done, yes, just because we found the need was there, and we were getting a lot of referrals from different professions, physios, sports docs, consultants, and we were seeing a lot of second opinion rehab work around. I don't know, I'm biased because I treat the foot and ankle, but I always think the foot and ankle just gets forgotten about. And I think during the rehab process, it's often not pushed hard enough. And I think sometimes the rehab journey people go on isn't explained to them well enough. So I just felt that we could do something different. And that's how we then said, right, I'm you know me long enough now. I'm one of these people with like, if I want to try and change something, I'm like, instead of moaning about it, let's get on and try and change it. Whether I do right or wrong, I don't know. But I almost like, because I now do it, it gives me the entitlement. Then also, like, if I want to moan about it, I can do. So I'm actually trying to fix the problem as well,
Yeah,
rather than just sat there in my armchair just moaning about it and doing nothing.
it sort of touches on a topic I was going to bring up later, but I'll do it now, which is somewhat, and we'll have a few different topics around visibility of podiatry. But if I were a runner, which I'm absolutely not, but let's just say I was, and I had an Achilles tendinopathy, I think the only person I would come and see is you.
Mhm.
It, any runner with an Achilles tendinopathy, go and see Nick. He's got it. That isn't what most patients would think. I think the average patient would never even think of seeing a podiatrist and would go straight to a physio. And I think there's definitely a visibility issue, but also a marketing and education issue. Again, I think your average patient would never dream of going to see a pod. What do we do about that?
So I think it is podiatry as a whole, it has a really poor brand. And if we're being honest with ourselves, as a profession, we've most probably only got ourselves to blame for that. I think whether it's hard to say that, but at the end of the day, you got to take responsibility for what we do as a profession. There's a lot of sort of interprofessional fighting at times. I was speaking to an orthopedic surgeon and he sort of said, podiatry is a strange profession. He said, it's the only profession I know that they're willing to eat their young. So I think there's an element of we just need to put our differences aside and sort of like come together. And it's almost like we were chatting before we started recording it. A colleague of a friend of mine, Liam Manis, posted that someone come see him less than a review, but only 3 weeks prior to that had no idea what a podiatrist was. And for even my own personal journey, until 4 or 5 weeks before going studying podiatry, I didn't really have any clue what podiatrist was. It's only through a certain few life circumstances that I ended up finding out what it was. I had
Yeah,
no idea. I was like physio. And I think it just comes about, we need to do things to increase the awareness. And it's been great working with you guys and the team at HMDG to really learn about looking at what people think. I think we've been guilty in the past of trying to predict what people think and actually got it wrong a lot of the times, or assuming someone wants X, Y, and Z and getting hung up on things. But at the end of the day, I think we need to be speaking more to patients' language. We need to be telling stories more often about how we can help people. And I think we just need to try and en masse try and do it. And it's always going to be difficult because from an NHS England viewpoint, podiatry is an at-risk profession. It's a profession that's actually on a decline. So we have got a big uphill battle, but everyone that comes and sees us knows they get a good experience. So it's that.
I think you bring up a good number of issues there, and let's tackle them. So I saw the post by Liam, and yeah, it was and Leon's another customer and runs an absolute fantastic clinic around the corner from where I live. And yeah, he made the point that this patient said he's amazing review, but I've never known what a podiatrist is. I think that you actually get half the population think they know what a
Mm,
podiatrist is, which is they cut toenails, so really chiropodist. And then probably not even, I think about 90% of the population, that's how they see podiatrists. And then you've got the 10% that actually do know, but it's very rare. And I think there's definitely an issue with, you're right, it's the fact that podiatry as a whole has been marketing itself really terribly, in terms
mm,
of getting out there and saying this is what we do, and this is how cool we are, because it is actually a really cool profession.
yeah.
Whenever we bring um, new staff in, we talk about podiatrists, and they're like, "Oh, they do that." Like, yes, they do. And it's interesting that there's just this real either misinformation, um, or lack of education. But I will also say that we're very lucky, I think, because we tend to only work with the really cool podiatrists that do really cool stuff. We don't
Mm,
see a lot of the podiatrists, and I know there are many out there who literally don't want to get into MSK. They don't want to get into
mm.
the high-end treatments or complex conditions. They are happy just being chiropodists, and I think that's a little bit of a problem with the profession, because they're doing everything one way and focusing on one thing and educating people about that. But then you have, and I don't know the exact, I'd be interested to know what your opinion is, but what percentage of podiatrists actually do really cool stuff? What percentage, I'm not saying the routine is not cool, but you know what I'm saying. What percentages do routine and what percentage do high end?
So I don't know the stats, but we always talk about working at the top of your license because there is a need and a demand for the non-MSK stuff. And for some people, you do that really well. That could be limb saving for people. But there's also a cohort of population that for general foot care needs, and this is really controversial, and I may get shot down for a few colleagues by saying this, but maybe don't actually need the skill level of a podiatrist. So that you've got foot health practitioners and sort of thinking if
We're going to get into FHPs later, so let's not get
okay,
into
okay.
FHPs.
So it's one of those things that I think how many podiatrists are using their degree knowledge and level to the top of their ability. And I don't know the exact stats on that, but I think is if we think that it's part of the issue is as a podiatrist, we can do so many different things. You can become a podiatric surgeon, you can go do pediatrics, you can go diabetes, the at-risk foot, the MSK stuff. So that's part of the issue. It's such a wide variety, which makes it fantastic. But there is no dedicated training path like medicine to go down and subspecialize in anything on those lines. So when you look at people's journeys of how they got there, a lot of people have to sort of make their own path to get where they want to. And that takes a lot of time and effort to do that.
You just said using what they've learned in their degree and so on. I'll
Yeah.
throw a little devil's advocate in here. Do podiatrists really come out with all that much knowledge and
No.
expertise?
So it's like with any profession, it's like passing learning to drive doesn't make you a good driver. It shows you are safe to a certain level. Becoming a graduate podiatrist physio doesn't make you a good podiatrist or physio, but it shows you will have a basic safe level of understanding. But podiatrists as a whole now, when they graduate, have the ability to use local anesthetic. They have the ability to administer certain drugs and be able to supply certain antibiotics and do these things that not many other professions have the ability to do straight out of university. But how many podiatrists are still actually using all of those skills that they had? Or is it a case of if you don't use it, you lose it type thing?
Mhm.
And I think this is where we're at a profession is that I do think we are getting this split divide. But I also think there are a lot of podiatrists out there who want help and want to learn, but actually because it's such a small profession and there can be a lot of interprofessional bickering as it were at times, are those podiatrists then sort of nervous about sort of raising their hand saying, hey, I need some help because they don't want to be shot down
Yeah,
type
I,
thing?
I, I think we go back to that whole point of the profession's been terrible at marketing itself, and individual clinics actually have been really terrible at marketing themselves. You know, that's where we've come in and helped a few. And it's been really interesting because actually marketing podiatry is so bloody easy, but they've just been terrible at doing it and never thought about doing it. I guess I would throw maybe some of the blame back on, let's call them people like you,
Uh-huh.
the more influential podiatrists who are pushing things forward. their own businesses, but have done basically fuck all. Maybe I'm wrong, but fuck all to kind of push the profession forwards. Like I've heard lots of talk about, oh, we need to really do something. We need to drive the profession forwards. We need to help other clinics. Need to help clinicians. But I've seen very little of it actually. So how much are you guys to blame for being very sort of insular and I'm just focusing on this and not really caring that much about the profession and driving it forwards?
I'm not going to massively disagree with you on that. I think it is things are changing. There has been some of the powers that be with hiring in the profession is hasn't maybe gone in the right way. And has there been personal journeys that people want to embark on in the past? Yes, but I think as a whole now we are trying as a collective to do more to try and sort of improve the awareness of podiatry. And I think it is hard because sometimes in the past I've gone to try or other people have gone to try and do stuff, but then you then get shot down because you're like, oh no, it's not NHS, you can't do NHS. There's always this NHS. So sometimes after so many times you being shot down, you're like, you get a little frustrated with it all. But it's one of those things. I think if you were to take a sort of a high level overview, it's not one thing. It's most probably a catalogue of errors that haven't happened that have led us to this point. And it does try and need fixing as a whole because podiatrists are definitely needed. But if the profession doesn't do anything, is the profession still going to be here in its entirety in 15, 20 years' time? Or is it going to be broken up and piggybacked onto other professions or other aspects of healthcare later on?
Yeah, I think I don't know about it being gone, but certainly I think there needs to be some kind of concerted effort. I've spoke to a few people actually about this in the past. I think you as well. We had a bit of a chat. I would love to be involved in a project where we can really push podiatry because let's be honest, like we're being a little bit down at the moment. But actually, from a marketing standpoint, podiatry is a shitload of fun. It's
Yeah.
actually really easy as well. You are the most tech-enabled kind of MSK clinics out there, which is always fun to market when done right. There's a lot of innovation happening, more so than in physiotherapy. I mean, Christ, the innovation there is like they actively fight against any kind of innovation. So I think podiatry is in actually quite a good place in many ways.
Yeah.
I think obviously there are issues with the number of podiatrists that are coming through. I think there are issues, and this is just from my. I'd be interested to get your take on this. I think that the profession is generally quite male led, but actually most of the grads coming out now, I think, are female, and so I think that's a really interesting point as well. That there
So,
are so many females coming through and younger females, but it's still a very male dominated and led environment. Have you seen that?
so from my understanding, the stats are there are more female registered podiatrists than there are male. But if you look at the higher end jobs, they are more male dominated than female dominated. And yes, that needs to we need to try and look at okay why that is. But also the bigger picture is actually if you look at the average age of the person who goes to start podiatry, the majority of people who become podiatrists is their second, third career
Yeah.
type thing. I joined podiatry when I was 18 and there are a few, but they are minority, not the majority. And for me, it's like actually, how do you capture that? And essentially, how do you make podiatry sexy to a 18-year-old to say, actually, do you know what? I want to do this because I only got into it via the yellow pages, writing to a chap called Paul Harradine, and he replied. I went and spent a week with him, and I was like, "Yes, I want to do that." But if he didn't reply, I wouldn't have been here now.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Nick. 'Cause, agreed. I think if I said to my 17-year-old son, "God, you should be a podiatrist," he's going to be like, "No, Dad." But if I showed him all the cool stuff you guys do, I think that changes things. And again, I think
There was a infographic that went round, and it was like what the public think I do, and it had someone cutting toenails. It had what my friends think I do is massaging someone's leg, and then there's a picture of what I actually do, and it is that disconnect between, and you see it in all jobs, don't you? But it is you get other professions where they are big enough and large enough to ride that out and make big change, whereas podiatry we are small and we need to do something to change because I'm really fortunate. Like, yes, there's been a lot of down talk about podiatry so far, but I absolutely bloody love my job. I'm really fortunate. I don't have a job. I have a hobby that I get paid to do.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love. I work about a few hours a week, and that is when I'm doing notes and letters. But now with the use of AI, actually, that's even less.
Yeah. No,
Seeing patients, I'm like, I love it.
and I'll tell you now, if I've said this a million times before, if I was to open a healthcare clinic tomorrow, it would be a podiatry clinic. We have been a bit down on podiatry, but generally, like, you make way more money than everyone else. You charge more money than everyone else. You're tech enabled, which again, I love. I think there's a lot of innovation in the industry. Find it's very rare. I've met one, but it's very rare. I don't I meet a podiatrist that I don't really like. They're generally fantastic. Yeah, I think it's a great industry. I think, yes, there's a marketing problem. Yes, there's a visibility problem. But I don't think they're that difficult to solve. I think people just need to get together. And as you alluded to earlier, there's a little bit of toxicity within the podiatry
Yeah,
profession, but not as much, I think, as in, let's say, physiotherapy, actually, or
yeah,
osteopathy. That's another one, right? I think there's more toxicity and infighting there than there is in podiatry.
yeah. Oh yeah, well, yeah, I will be sort of blindsided to a degree because I see my own profession. I see the Facebook groups and everything that goes on. I don't see the physiotherapy in other way. You'll be in that fortunate position where you'll have a wider scope of the sort of the AHP land, as it were.
I would say there is more communication and friendliness and networking within the podiatry community than there is now there. Okay. Whenever I speak to any podiatrist, I'll mention 30 of our other pod clinics. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know him really well. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, we went to dinner. Oh, we went for drinks." You don't get that in other professionals. And I think you are also way more open to sharing advice. I remember Rachel Green's one of our customers, who's one of my favorites, other than you, of course. But Rachel Green's love, and she's going to be doing a pod in the next few weeks.
yeah. HR issues there.
But I remember we had another client, and it escapes me now, but just opening a brand new clinic. And I put them in touch, and Rachel was more than happy to go for
Yeah,
a cup of coffee and help out and give advice. The amount of that I see is really impressive in the podiatry industry. And conversely, the amount of physios and I don't want to pick just on physios, just using that as more of a general term. The amount of physios I see who say, "Don't tell anyone else what I'm doing." Just literally the other day, I was asked to sign an NDA because they didn't want anyone to know their secrets. You know what the secret was? Shockwave for runners. Anyway, so I put about 5 years too late, my friend.
okay,
But
yeah.
but in any case, it is interesting to see that you do have a really nice community. You do all often, not all, but many of you do work together and chat, and you are pushing for the same things. Maybe you're just all too bloody busy, so you don't get together properly and kind of.
Yeah, you're right. Because before I had kids, I used to run I used to be on like the chair of the committee of the local podiatry branch, and I used to run like an MSK UK thing, and we used to get together and have like monthly, quarterly meetings, and even now, I will still get messages from people asking for tips and advice on things, and I'll still just open up until I'm a very open book kind of chap. I
Mm.
will still because I view it as that people turn around and say, "Oh, you're giving your competitors an edge." No, I'm not. You're helping grow the profession because we need more awareness out there. There's enough bloody feet out there to go around for all of us. It
Well,
doesn't.
I wish other clinics saw the same thing. I had someone the other day say, "Oh, I don't want you working with anyone else within 30 miles of me or 50 miles." And I'm like, listen, there are enough patients to go around. And quite honestly, we don't take on clients who are like that. I want people who are collaborative. I
Yeah,
once had someone that was up in Scotland moaning about they didn't want someone in Southampton knowing what they're up to. And I'm like, that's not how this should be working. Like, if you don't think the chairman of Vodafone and BT don't sit together for lunch and discuss things, you're wrong. They do. And I think
yeah,
it's really important. Great. It's great that it actually does happen in this industry. And I think I wish more clinic owners in other sort of disciplines could learn from podiatry clinic owners, because I think the information that you can share is so valuable and so important. I always talk about, in many sort of disciplines in this sector, it's very difficult to benchmark. It's very difficult to know how others are doing. So you are almost like a
yeah,
little island, and you're always crapping yourself. "Oh my God, my business is falling over because you've had a bad month." Or, I don't know what to do here. But in your area, I think there's always someone to pick the phone up to or ask, right? There's always someone where you
yeah.
can say, "What do you think? I'm having a problem with this. I'm having a problem with that." And I think that's super important. A massive credit to the people, at least who I know and have experienced, who are podiatry clinic owners.
Yeah, I have now got some very good friends that are podiatrists. Some have helped mentor me. Some have been there when I've had an issue to pick up the phone to. There's always a good list of people I know that I could phone, and they'll either pick up the phone or ring me back within a day saying, "Hey Nick, what's up?" And I can talk stuff through using the soundboard, and we can bash something out. And it's great just to have that ability to do that. So that is again one of the beautiful things of the profession, is that
Yeah.
we got this common goal of just want to help people get better. And I think if you speak to most podiatrists, it's a case of we want the profession to thrive, but we're not quite sure what's the best way to go about it. And I think I've been guilty in the past of not reaching out and realizing, I want to try and do this. I want to try and do my own marketing for NK Active. Realized, do you know what? It's not my forte. I'm not great at it. Tried a few other things and then found HMDG, and it has been transformational for us because that's what you guys do. So it's collaborating and it's finding those different people with different skill sets. So you basically got the right bum on the right seat at the right time. It's almost like rule 101 of running a business, isn't it? Of
Yeah.
just like, and
Well,
if you can do that, things will fly.
I always say this is why I never did my own accounts. Like I can
Yeah.
work a spreadsheet just, but let an expert do it. But it's
I
interesting.
had to do mine during the pandemic, and my practice manager, I reckon she would have just shot me because she sort of said, "Nick, every time you're on payroll, it was like a few pence out." And she said, "It's fine, no one really noticed, but it creates a havoc on the accounts on the back end." So I'm banned from doing. I'm banned from doing
Well,
admin. I'm banned from doing accounts. So I'm just
I
not good at
remember
it.
when you first started with us, and obviously we got very close over the years, and so I know all those numbers. It wasn't that you were doing necessarily badly, um, but it was again just a visibility problem. You had this incredible business, incredible people, you and so on and so forth. But it was that visibility again, right? It was that education. It was getting out there in front of people, letting people know what you do. So yeah, I won't get into it too much, but there are a few sort of early discussions where you're like, this is really fucking not bad, but I just want to grow a bit more. I want to let more people know about us, and it wasn't that difficult, was it? It took a
No.
little while, but yeah, it's been really interesting. And I think it's very easy if there's pods listening who do routine and they're like, I don't understand. We're really, really busy. You can get very busy on routine podiatry. That's easy. It's getting busy on
Mm.
the fun stuff, on the more
Yeah.
complex stuff. Because again, I think the majority of people just end up at a physio and not really know what a pod does.
Yeah.
Let's talk about tech. I'm going to something
Yes.
controversial here because I love a bit of tech.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think that tech is underused in much of healthcare. I can't believe that you don't have at this point in every GP surgery an AI that tells you to bugger off and Timmy's got a cold rather than coming in for an appointment. I think there should be full AI triage and doctor support and doctor surgeries and so on. But podiatry has been very good at adopting new technologies, and there's also some really great businesses out there. I was just at the Gait in Motion event, and the
Mhm.
guys there, they're fantastic. Really enjoyed that event. You know, they've done a lot, I think, to push a lot of technology. But something that is often true is the first thing is you can spend a lot on the technology and the ROI isn't always there. And I
Mhm.
think people lose money. And then I think also beyond that, well, let me ask you a question without slamming any particular business or whatever. How much of the tech out there is just absolute fluff and nonsense? And
Yeah.
how much of it is useful? And I guess another way of asking that question would be, what could you not do without in terms of running your business and your clinic?
Okay. So we purely look from a tech perspective, and yeah, I'm not. It's one of those things that do we need to look at it a slightly different way? Either is that all I think tech has a place, but it's truly understanding what that tech does and using the tech in the right way. I think there are many people guilty of having tech and saying it will do something, but that what it wasn't designed to do the thing they're answering a question for. So it's not the tech issue, it's the person using the tech in the wrong way. I
Yeah.
think there is lots of stuff. There are lots of different types of gait analysis kit out there. I don't think none of them are inherently bad or wrong, but I think how sometimes we use data to then try and then sell something. It's a case of, well, you're saying, I don't know. So you take 2D gait analysis, for example. In 2D gait analysis, people are asking, okay, what's the best tech to use for a 2D gait? And I'm like, personally, just use your bloody iPhone now. Actually, you don't need any more. It's got slow motion settings, slow down on there. But then I get frustrated when people then start drawing angles on there because you can't determine sort of rotation on a 2D camera. You're just guessing. You can't do that. So yes, use a tech, but you got to understand the limitations of the tech and what it can and can't do. I think there are some times where actually tech may get fluffed up, where actually just go back to using something completely basic. You
Mm.
don't need to do stuff.
I suppose it sort of allows. I think one of the issues with any tech in any industry, really, but particularly in this, is that you can use the tech to then generate revenue. So I remember many years ago,
Yes.
I was my ex-girlfriend, girlfriend at the time. She was doing the marathon, so she wanted to buy some new trainers from the Nike store in Oxford Street. So we went up to the top where they had all these bloody
Uh-huh.
expensive trainers, and they had like a gait analysis thing set up, and they made a run on it, and they started drawing all these angles, and they were like, right, this is the shoe that you need. And I was a little bit dubious at the time. It was like a £400 shoe, but it was really interesting because everyone was queuing up for this thing to just understand what was the best shoe. And of course, they had no idea. They were just kind of pointing and choosing. But you can use technology a lot to oversell. And I guess you run into that, or podiatry clinics can run into that same problem that chiropractic clinics often have, which is, oh, we've got an x-ray. Look,
Mm.
now you need 25 treatments to solve a non-existent problem.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that going on at the moment.
I think there is a lot of that going on at the moment. It's just being, I think, being true to yourself with the tech and really understanding, asking the question, okay, so we've got a lot of tech in clinic. We've got 3D gate systems. We've got strengths by numbers, fourth platforms and dynamometers. We've got an anti-gravity treadmill. We've got our own 3D printer. We got lots of stuff in clinic, but it's understanding what's the right time to use it for the right person. And I think it's always asking the question before I do any 3D gate on someone is what's the question I want to answer? If I can't answer that, then it's not the right time to use that bit of tech because with any form of gait analysis, you could pick holes in anyone's gait. But it doesn't actually mean it's going to be a problem for them. It's actually making it relevant to the problem, or is it going to actually change or impact the treatment plan? This is why we don't let people book in for a gait analysis. They've got an injury straight off the bat. A lot of patients come and say, I've been told I need a gait. Well, actually, if you come in and you've got an Achilles problem, you've gone from no running to running 100 miles a week, you don't need a gait. You just need a bit of education about load management. Your gait's not the issue. It's the fact you went from 0 to 100 in the course of a really short period of time. Your gait's almost irrelevant. So it's understanding when to use the tech. We don't necessarily, on every initial appointment, we don't do a 3D gate or a pressure analysis on every single patient that comes through the door because not every patient actually needs it. So
Mm.
it's like you just then, in my mind, is you just use a tech for the patients needed at the right time. But it's
Yeah,
also, you've got to be true to yourself because it is very easy to turn and say, I've got this thing that gives me lots of flashy images and it looks very pretty and great and charge a little bit extra and actually I see all these people coming in, but actually how many people need all of that
it's always
stuff?
this is it's a never ending question. It's that balance between generating revenue and treating the patient at the right level for the best outcome. And I think everyone has this issue. Everyone has this problem. You know, you just bought yourself a laser. There's a lot of clinics, they need to pay for it. So they laser the shit out of everybody for everything, right? It's one of those things, but there is always that balance. And I think
Yeah,
it's sometimes quite difficult to strike, particularly, you know, we're talking here of businesses where the margin's not massive, right? It's not like you're making £1,000 lifetime value of a patient.
yeah,
Well, maybe sometimes we, but it is a difficult one, and you need to monetize it, right? You need to
you
get
do.
an ROI on the kit that you've.
But that's the risk when you buy tech. It's like if you give someone a hammer, everything becomes a nail. As soon as you buy a bit of tech, you are already financially invested in actually are you more likely to recommend it because you've brought it and you think shit I've got to make all this money back and everything on those lines. But to go back to your question, one bit of tech I couldn't be without, it would be our dynamometers and force plates, but not for the reason that people think. And I think a lot of tech, we think about it in the wrong way. What I absolutely love about dynamometers and force platforms is the ability to help educate the patient. So if someone's coming with an Achilles problem, we're saying like, right, we need to go for a rehab plan and actually we need to focus on some strength around the hips. They're like, "Oh, why do I need to do that?" Well, actually, if we can use some data to show them, like, actually, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And then they get what I call emotionally brought into the program. and you need them to do it because they're the ones doing the work. I don't fix people. People fix themselves. I just take them on a road of discovery.
This is absolutely crucial, actually, because this has come up a lot recently where we keep getting asked about retention. Retention,
Yeah.
retention, retention. It pisses me off because if you are doing a great job, and we all have this, right? We have companies or whatever businesses that we love. We don't need to be retained. I'm sure there's plenty of people that have a hairdresser. They don't need to be retained. They just go back because it's a great service and so on. And I think one of the most important parts of retention and getting a patient back is getting them to buy in and educating them. Because once you've done that, it doesn't become a problem, right? Because you get them to buy in exactly what you educate them, knowledge is power, and then they buy in pretty easily to what you're suggesting that they do. And I think a lot of clinics and clinic owners forget this. They focus too much on my clinician isn't retaining. I need to do more retention and have retention strategies. Where in actual fact, if they kind of went back to the start and said, okay, let's look at the training element of this. Are clinicians getting proper buy-in and are they educating enough? I think they would have far less of a problem.
Yeah, because the majority of our workload is MSK based. I don't actually, as a metric, measure rebook rate past the first appointment because I'm like, in our eyes, it's like I want to effectively discharge every patient we see. And had a patient a couple of weeks back I hadn't seen for like 10 years come back because they had a different problem and they knew that. So I'm like, well, if you offer that good service, we haven't got to worry about getting people through the door constantly. And I'd also argue, so we have a rule, and it's something I actually stole from Dr. Andrew Franco Miller, is that when we do a rehab plan, as it were, it's 5 sessions. After that 5 sessions, there's a break and a stop point. Because by that time, we should either be seeing significant progress or they should be back to where they want to be. If they're not, we need to sit there and ask, is the plan right? Is the diagnosis right? Are we the right people? Do we need to refer on? So you don't run in this cycle of actually having to sign up for 50 sessions and come in every week for the next year type thing, because that is it's just criminal in my eyes. Like
Yeah.
in something like musculoskeletal based injuries, we know that actually you shouldn't be needing that number of sessions on a regular basis. It's something that we have a duty of care of not overselling and fleecing someone. And that's when I get really irritated about practice. And I've got no issue of selling packages. We sell packages of care, but there's a definitive start and stop, and there's a definitive plan of what we're going to do. And then after that, it is reviewed. It's not just, oh, let's just keep this going on because I know I can get an extra few sessions. And sorry, I'm ranting because it really annoys me.
Well, within the next 24 hours, we're going to release something on packages, and we're going to slate anybody that uses them.
Yeah.
I know you use them.
Yeah.
You do use them slightly differently, though. But yeah, no, I do agree. I think, though, that, again, there's always this sort of balance. And I look at this slightly more from a patient position. And I'll give you a real example. And I was talking to Mark about this morning, where I had a neck issue. This is for Mark. Mark is a physio that now works for us, but at the time he was my physio for this neck condition. And it was a 3-month condition. I was going to be fine. And he ethically could have said, Michael, 1 appointment per month, three appointments, that's all you need. And that would have been very ethical. And that would have been the way to do it. And that's all I needed from his perspective. However, from my perspective, I was in real pain. I was worried, became very stupid, as you do when you're in pain. And I remember once having a session with him where I just said, Mark, every time I sit like this, it really hurts. And he went, don't fucking sit like that then. And obviously to most people listening, they're like, yeah, it's obvious advice. But for me, it wasn't. I was like, I was in pain. And so I do think that sometimes clinicians can forget that patients may want something that they don't necessarily need. And I don't mean when a patient says, I need 200 massages to release my trapped nerve. That's fucking stupid. And no, you've got to educate them. Sometimes patients do want a little bit more help or reassurance or whatever. I do think that there is sometimes a tendency to be too ethical, too black and white, and say, no, that's all you need. You don't need to come back. Bugger off.
Yeah, I think it's all like giving patients, being clear and giving patients choice and options. So we will do packages and we'll have our rehab package, which is 5 sessions over 3 to 4 months. And that only come out from our own audit data of which works for our population of data that we see. We'll offer patients that, but we'll also say, if that's not right for you, you can just do it session by session basis. We'll give them options. I won't let them make a decision that I think is detrimental to them. And you get some patients who are like, need a bit of hand holding. You got some patients who are like, actually, we'll do the strength test and we'll give them a program and they'll fly, but we don't need to see them again. It's just giving those, it's understanding we're as human beings, we all have different needs. I'm someone, even though I know what I'm doing, if I've got an injury, the team had to write me a bloody program, even though, because if I haven't got a program, I just won't do it. I'm just that type of person. So I'm that person. I need that rigidity. You get some patients who are much better and don't need that. You got some who are a little more
Mm.
nervous. And I think we do have to be aware that there's almost not vulnerability, but you're getting patients coming who've got pain, they've got a problem, or they can't do the sport, or they can't do the exercise to the level they want. So it's almost like their guard is down slightly. And I think we've got to be careful that we don't scaremonger into people doing stuff that they don't need to be
Yeah.
doing, as it were.
Agreed. I just sort of, as a side note, something we've been seeing a lot more of recently is patients turning up in clinic incredibly well educated with a rehab program in hand because they asked their best mate ChatGPT.
Mhm.
How much of that are you seeing?
We're starting to see more of it, but actually I love it because it is when I start discussing to them about different treatment options, is they've got a bit of understanding. It's not a complete shock to them. And actually for us, the use of AI is helping us solve some of our visibility
I
issues.
You know what? I just want to jump in because that's I love hearing that and I love that attitude because it's fucking pissing me off right now. AI is being battled against by so many clinic owners. There's such a pushback against it and oh, it's never going to help us. It's never going to take over from us because we're too good and nothing will diagnose as well as we have. We have the human. Pisses me off because it's bullshit. What I've seen is really interesting is that there are a number of people who are just so anti kind of innovation and AI and so on. And then people like you who are like, I love it. There is an opportunity. We can utilize it, whether
Yeah.
it's in clinic or with patients or whatever. And I think it's just so refreshing to hear someone say, I love it
Yeah.
and we can really utilize it. And it'll be really interesting. We're going to be doing some stuff with our innovation lab, which we're going to announce at some point in Jan. I'll talk to you about that privately. Can't launch anything here live, but where we really want to start looking at the exploitation of using various things to really enable, um, again, a drive forward within the industry. I just think I don't think there are enough people who see things as opportunities in this industry.
Oh, and I think if we go back our earlier thing about how do we help promote podiatry as a profession, I think AI could just accelerate that
Yeah.
massively. I've even tried it ourselves of like, right, I've got a foot and ankle problem, frame ankle playing football. I'm in the Romsey, Southampton area. Who do I go and see? And NK Active was one of the recommended things. And I said, hang on, you've recommended a podiatrist. Don't I traditionally need a physio? And this is nothing against physio. This is what the public normally
Right.
perceive. And they said, yes, well, you think that, but actually NK Active is a specialist foot and ankle clinic, and this is their rehab approach, and they take a real personalized approach. So actually, we think they're possibly a better outfit for what you want for you. And I was like, this is going to be so helpful to like help that education
So
and
do we do,
awareness.
we do your AI SEO?
You do.
Ah, so something we've seen a lot of, and the reason we're doing AI SEO, it's a bit of a sidetrack, but it is important. But patients are starting to there's this big behavioral change in what patients are asking, and we do it ourselves, right? A few years ago you might say, I want a kettle, and do a search for that. Now you're searching, I'd like a kettle, I've got black worktops, my kitchen's green, what would fit best into an interior design, blah blah blah. I want something that's economical, yeah, whatever the question is. And what we've seen in healthcare is patients asking an initially simple-ish question and then asking more sort of complex questions because they're being
Mm.
pushed to it by the AI, and then ultimately asking really interesting questions where AI gives them answers like, yes, go and see Nick at NK Active because XYZ. And would you like me to tell you what you might expect and what the rehab program might look like? And so patients are, coming through. And by the way, I did it recently with a plumber, with our heating and Nest and whatever. And I was like, I want to know what's coming my way. I want to be informed before they turn up. So
Yeah.
when they try and charge me $1,000, I know to tell them to sod off. So it is really interesting. I think, again, another massive opportunity, because I think, although also a danger, because this is interesting. Again, a side point, but I think my opinion is, particularly when it comes to general MSK, 80% of patients who go and see a physio probably don't need to go and see a physio at that point. Probably 90% of that 80% are better on their own within a week, or at least starting to progress, right?
Mhm.
So what happens when you say, I've just fallen over, I've tripped over, my ankle's a bit blue, should I go and see a physio? And AI says, not yet, don't worry about it. Can you walk 4 steps? Yes, I can. Or no, I can't. Don't worry about physio, go to any. I think AI is now
Mm.
dissuading a lot of patients to use MSK services and saying, wait a little bit. But that's also interesting. I think that's going to have a bit of an impact.
I think that is interesting. Luckily, well, we currently don't have that issue in podiatry because podiatry is normally the last profession people go to. They've normally been to see everyone else first. So by the time they phone us up, yes, you do need to see us because this is now chronic type thing. But I still get some patients message us saying, "Oh, I've just tweaked my calf muscle. I need an appointment." I'm like, "No, you don't. Give it a couple of weeks. If you still got an issue in a couple of weeks' time," or they'll turn and say, "Oh, I went out for a run. My legs hurt," and I was like, "You just got DOMS. You're okay."
Nick, you are the least businessy businessman I've ever met. Bloody hell.
I
The answer is
know, but
you need to pay me £500 for an assessment.
but I'm just not like that. This is
No.
why I'll never be a sort of retiring in Barbados with multiple mansions type things because I just
Well, you
like
might if it keeps going as it is. Jesus.
yeah. So it's definitely there are lots of things I think AI is going to be really helpful for, and I think the awareness is going to be great for podiatry. I think also though is that if you're not operating at the top of your license, like I said earlier, I think AI may find you out because if a patient comes in with an expectation and you try offer them something non-evidence informed and non-evidence based, I think
Oh,
patients are going to start questioning you about that.
yeah. Did you read my last newsletter about that?
I did, yeah.
It's really interesting. There's a lot of clinics, I think, that are going to have to start removing some of what they say and not offering certain things for certain things they've been offering it for. And we're seeing it more and more. And you can test it yourself. Um, should I go? My physio says I need cupping to solve my chronic lower back pain. Get a new physio. It is really interesting because obviously GPT is plugged into NICE. It is plugged
Mm.
into a lot of the Cochrane Research, PubMed, and so on. So you've got to be careful what you're offering. And if you do get a client into the clinic and we have this as well ourselves, right? And we're seeing clients do more and more of this. They're putting their stuff through or saying, Michael said this, or Gabby said this. You know, is this legitimate advice? And GPT hopefully always says, in fact, we keep getting reports back going, GPT says you're doing really great stuff. I'm like, thank you. We know. But it is interesting because if we started saying, Nick, you need to start paying £3,000 a month for this crazy new thing, you put it into GPT and you'd find us out pretty quickly.
Yeah, you would do. And it is I think it is interesting that it will help accelerate people's learning and understanding of things. I think the only thing is healthcare we've got to be wary of is having that critical appraisal mindset of just making double checking the information it's giving is true. But I think as AI develops, that will get better and better. It will learn to weed out the crap basically
I
over
think
time.
so. I think so. And I still check. I use GPT for pretty much everything in my life
Yeah.
now.
But even people say I don't use it, but actually now it's integrated into Google's main search. It is there.
Yeah, yeah.
People may not use GBT, but Google have integrated it on the search bar. It will give you AI response, and then you got that little AI deeper view button or
Yeah,
whatever it's called.
yeah. It's everywhere. And I was chatting to my financial person, whatever. I just do all my financial investment stuff myself now. And he said, "Yeah, do it. You're going to get better results than we are." And you it's exactly what the 0.5% fees. It's happening in every profession. But quite honestly, and I know that there's this. I heard this thing the other day from a physio saying, but it's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be. It's going to sometimes be inaccurate and give you bad advice. I would personally pit GPT against any 5,000 physios, random 5,000 physios. I keep using the term physio. I'm going to say MSK clinician instead. And I would bet that GPT wins overall in terms of accuracy.
Well, wasn't I think there was a study done where they picked some images of X-rays or MRIs, and they put that against radiologists, and AI wasn't too far off in
Yeah.
picking up the same diagnosis. And I think, but it's human nature. We're scared of change, isn't it? I think if we had the ability to do this during the Industrial Revolution, or when computers first come out, or when the internet was first introduced, everyone was like, "Oh, it's not going to take off." Blockbuster's made a mistake of not buying Netflix. Oh, that's never going to work. Well, look at it now, type thing. It's sort
Yeah.
of like, it's one of those things that I've just learned over time that there is nothing we can do to stop this AI train whatsoever. It is coming along. So you either got to jump on board and learn how to work with it or get left behind. And going back to your comment of people coming in with the rehab plans, that doesn't phase me whatsoever because it's not. And the thing that AI can't do is the intricacy of learning about that individual human being. I say we published some of our data. We've done a little poster presentation at a conference about it. And when you talk about rehab, the actual physical exercise or the technique doing that exercise is most probably the least important thing. The important thing is actually just bloody doing things on a consistent basis. And the important thing in doing that is actually getting to know the human being attached to it.
Mm.
So you actually, yes, you've got a program. Anyone can go on YouTube and get a program, but actually there's one thing getting the program, doing it is. So when I do any stuff, when people say to me, oh, Nick, what's the best exercise for X? And I'm like, that's the wrong question. Get to know the human being first, find out what their barriers are, and then you can implement that plan and tell them how to do it.
I think that there are those nuances, and I think there is that understanding and knowledge of the person. I have a private doctor, and I said I sent them a WhatsApp, and I said I'm worried about my younger son James, and she said go to A&E, and I was like what? She said Michael, you never worry about anything. If you're contacting me worried, it's a problem. Go, and she was right. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with him in the end, but it was really incredible that she knew who I was and to be able to not have to even think and just go, right, this is what you need to do. And I think that's what AI can't yet do. I think it
No,
will
it can.
probably plug in, but
Yeah, but it's like even during consultations with patients, I used to sit there with a notepad and pen and write notes as I went. Now it's like I don't. I can sit there and just listen, and patients love it because I can just pay more attention to them and listen to them. And I think if you want to get better at MSK stuff, it is learn to use your ears more,
yeah,
because and ask the right questions, and that's as complex as it is. You can look at all your fancy tests and everything, but until you learn to take a good history and listen, you're never really going to
yeah,
succeed how you want. And AI allows me just to be more present with the patient and not worry about the stuff afterwards. And it's almost like, it's like if you're in a busy day in clinic and like you've made notes throughout the end of the day, and then you do your notes and letters and like you try and do them as you go, but something cropped up, you need the loo, coffee or whatnot. You get to the end of the day, you got 6, 7 sets of notes to do. Actually, how many errors were you making while they were actually patient presented with left hip pain when actually it was their right hip pain and
mm.
stuff along those lines. Now AI just
And we use Fathom for all of our client calls now, so
yeah
every beautifully recorded. It's all there. It's changed our world, and we're using so much more AI. We will be doing something really special on AI and the use of AI in businesses. So we'll get into that another point. I don't want to make this podcast too long because we can natter for fucking hours, but there's a few topics I just want to cover and
yeah
quickly.
yeah
One is let's talk orthotics, orthoses, and ethics.
okay. So I think foot orthoses are the most underused and overused products within a podiatrist treatment arm. I think there's a lot of the time they're not used in the right times, but a lot of the time they're not used, they're just overused too much. I think and that comes down to, again, like the tech question, it's not the orthosis fault. It's actually the clinician not really understanding, okay, what is it that I want to achieve from this? And it goes back to patients you saying, coming in saying, oh, I got a flat foot. I need orthoses to straighten you up because that's what Instagram stories told me. And I'm like, well, that's just utter trash. But it's one of those things, it really grates me. And sometimes there's that relief with some patients, like, Nick, you're not going to offer me insoles. No, you don't need insoles. We got some data here that shows this is most likely a strength issue. Insoles may be needed, but if we're playing an odds game, most probably 70% of your issue is strength and training related. So let's focus on the big bit. We may go to orthoses at a later stage if needed, but why jump for the 30%? Let's start at the 70% because that's got a higher odds of winning
I,
for you.
I have a personal story on that. My eldest son, he's had flat feet from the age of like whatever, 9 or 10 or whatever. And his mum all the time, constantly harassing me. We need to go and get an appointment. He's got inverted ankles. I don't know what inverted ankles are. She's just read all this stuff. And every pod, I think it may even be you, everybody was like, does it hurt? No, then leave it the fuck alone.
They're like,
Like,
yeah.
just leave it.
Yeah.
eventually it did hurt, and he got some knee pain, bit of hip pain. So we went in and saw Susie Spears, who's really lovely, great.
Fantastic pod.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
she's amazing. Yeah, we went and saw Susie, and yeah, we got some nice orthotics at that time, and it was great, and it solved everything. And but it was really interesting that there are so many people who just immediately think I need to go and buy some orthotics. And in fact, one of the biggest searches actually around podiatry is flat feet and orthotics, and that's why Amazon gets so much business selling insoles. And it actually, just on that, it does make me wonder why so few podiatry clinics market a peds or flat foot service, because the searches are there, and I think it's a massive moneymaker, even if it is a you don't need this, come back when this happens.
Hmm.
I think number one, you'd be doing a great job and saving parents a lot of money buying some really weird stuff and probably causing more issues than they're solving. But number two, there will be some that will need the service, and you make a lot of money. So I don't. Do you know why so few clinics are offering that or marketing that?
I think it's just because if you look at the majority of the evidence out there, it is purely from an evidence viewpoint, is that most kids with flat feet don't need any intervention whatsoever. But there's also, and that's what the research says. There's also an element though of actually sometimes it's like you say with your neck. Don't sit in that angle. You think it's bloody obvious. We think it's bloody obvious they don't need it, but actually patients and their parents sometimes don't need it. Sometimes just that bit of reassurance is really helpful. What I think is really, really simple to them is just like actually they just need that bit of reassurance.
My
And
question.
I think, yeah,
So that's my question. So, for example, you got all these chiropractors with their free spinal checks, complete nonsense. But I encourage physio clinics to offer spinal checks, not because they're in any way useful or
mm,
doing them, because it gets patients in and they can say, yeah, forget that, ignore it. What is the actual problem? And you then examine them, and you keep people away from the dodgy chiropractor who's about to sell them 300 sessions. So even if it isn't needed, it's still a service that people would pay for, and somewhere where you can do a lot of good and say, you don't need this. Don't worry about it.
yeah. But I think a lot of the barriers come from our perception in the UK of charging for healthcare. I still think there's a barrier, some clinicians of like not, oh, we've got the NHS, so we shouldn't be able to charge for this. But I always look at it and say, well, it's not our job to decide what someone wants to pay or not pay
Correct.
for. It's one of those things that you got a service, the patient will decide whether they value that to pay the set fee on that service. As long as you're not selling someone that someone doesn't actually need, so you're not giving every kid a set of foot orthosis. But if that patient comes in and they have a checkup and you say to them, look, do you know what? Yes, you got flat feet, but you're doing all the sport, all the exercise, you've got no issues. I don't need to see you again. Come back if you get an issue. Patients are like, thank you very much. And so many people are grateful for that when I do that with them because they're like, I've had that bit of reassurance. I've had the checkup done. It's like going to the dentist on a regular basis, isn't it? You don't go to the dentist looking for a problem. You go to the dentist hoping to say you got the A-OK.
Yeah,
But if you haven't, you can act on anything that comes from it.
it's from clinic owners all the time, and they're always judging what someone should be paying, how much is it. Imagine if Ferrari said, you know what, let's not do Ferraris anymore. You can buy a perfectly good Fiat over there. Don't worry about it. It's as long as you are not overselling, as you say. And I think it's a great service. For example, I was very lucky because I know about a billion pods who told me not to do anything with Tom. But imagine if his mum had have gone and, you know, just bought those orthotics and seen specialists, and it would have been great for her to go in and see someone and for them to say, no, you don't
Yeah.
need it, and here's why. And you could
Yeah.
cause more problems by doing something about it.
If people rock up with a bag of foot orthoses, I'm like, the last thing you need is another insole because the odds of all of them not being one of them being right for you is quite slim. But it's also actually asking what the patients want. I've got some patients, I'm like, do you know, I think foot orthoses would be helpful, but they're like, Nick, I just don't want to wear them. I'm like, fine, let's change tacks and look at something else then, because it's about asking the patient, are they comfortable having them? Some patients have views on them and they don't want to change their views, which is completely okay. It's their choice, their decision. So it's one of those things that, in my eyes, it is just another tool in the treatment box to help facilitate someone doing an activity they want to do. Nothing more, nothing less. It's the same with taping or different shoes, or there are many ways to skin a cat. It's about trying to build the right plan at the right time for the right person. But not every person who comes into clinic with a foot or a knee issue actually needs foot orthoses.
Okay. Last topic.
Yeah,
Foot health practitioners, a threat, awful, terrible thing, FHPs, or useful and good?
useful. I think amazingly useful. Because if we're sort of thinking about what a podiatrist is and does, you got this degree level educated clinician that has this fantastic skill set. And with the demands of the population out there, if you've got someone that needs general foot care and health and advice, who has no medical issues, no complications, no concerns, you don't need a podiatrist. The way I think of it, it's like hygienists and dentists. It's sort of like if I've got a routine sort of clean or something needs my feet and I'm in good health, I don't need a dentist. I don't need to take the dentist time. I don't need to pay a dentist fee. I can go see the hygienist. And then the hygienist can then flag to the dentist if there's an issue. I think though there's a lot of the podiatry profession that are threatened by FHP, but is that because are some of those podiatrists offering an FHP based service
Yeah,
out
that's
there?
true. But let's take the hygienist analogy. Let's say the hygienist sets up and starts doing fillings.
So I think that's not, you can't blame a whole profession on that. You can't blame if an FHP goes rogue. You can't say all FHPs are bad. Like it's the same with.
So let me ask that question. Do you think it's because rogue implies very few, one or two? Do you think it's more of a trend within the FHP community that many of them are overstepping boundaries and doing things they really ought not?
So are they overstepping boundaries, or are they trying to push because there is no regulation and process? I think that's when you get down to it. That's the big issue that most pods really have, is the lack of boundaries and regulation for patients, public health and safety and awareness type thing of saying, right, an FHP can do this, this, and this. And FHPs are doing more and more, but there's no regulations in there to stop it. They're not governed by the HCPC. They don't actually have anyone to say, no, you can't do this. It's like facial fillers and like that. If you're a doctor or a nurse, you have to be registered with the CQC. But you could do a weekend course and not actually have to be registered with the CQC, and the CQC can't do anything protective. So I think it's a wider public um, safety awareness type thing, and you need better sort of restrictions in place and clear guidelines on what people can do. I would love FHPs to be taken under the HCPC wing to be able to then turn around and say, actually, this is where they sit, and people educators around it. But I think you're also saying that you're going to get other podiatrists that branch off and do things that aren't podiatry related, or physios trying to do stuff. And I'm like, sometimes just stay in your bloody lane, focus on what you're good at. Maybe spend more time doing the stuff that you should be doing, get better at doing that rather than worrying about other things, as it were. So I've got no issue with them, but I do think there is a need for better regulation out there just so you can help offer clarity to people. But the majority of FHPs that I know work well within their scope of practice. I trust in what they do, and they refer on as and when
Yeah,
needed.
I think clinics should certainly be hiring FHPs. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
What I'm seeing a bit of a trend of is other disciplinary clinics, let's say physios again, hiring FHPs and then claiming they have a podiatry service. They can't find a podiatrist, so they move to the FHP and then they say, "Oh yeah, we do podiatry." Now they may not say it publicly, but certainly internally, "Oh, we now do podiatry," and it's like I think that's where it becomes a little bit of a problem.
I think, yeah, that becomes an issue, but it's sort of technically, where are they actually breaking any rules and
It's not so
saying that?
much that I'm thinking more
But it's more the deception that I don't like with that.
from the patient perspective. So I spoke to a clinic owner not so long ago who said, "Oh, we've just got a foot health practitioner, so we want to run some podiatry ads." I said, "Well, we're not going to run podiatry ads because they're not podiatrists." They said, "It's the same thing." I'm like, I'm not not sure I agree, and I'm not sure many pods would agree with that.
It's not the same thing. It's like we don't employ physiotherapists. We have GSRs, and we've had many conversations about that, how much easier it would be to market the word physiotherapist than it is sports rehab. But we've been very clear in that we don't mention any of the words because we're not a physiotherapist. Now, don't get me wrong, patients will come and say, yeah, I'm here to see Nick and the team to do my physio based stuff, and we'll correct them. It's one thing patients saying it, but it's the other thing if you're actually putting it out there as a company and you know that information is wrong. And I think that is where people should have their wrists slapped to saying, come on. you know this isn't true, and you're just trying to do it to try and because it's an easier way to market something
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I don't think that's right. I think that's a little unfair.
All right. Listen, that's been a brilliant podcast. We've been on for an hour and five. These are supposed to
Yeah.
be like 30 to 40 minutes, but it's been lovely as always.
There,
Thank
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Shall do, mate.